All right, thanks for coming by, guys. I'm Dave Wilson, I'm with Enlitic. We're a data management company that looks at standardizing data that you can then use to leverage into real-world evidence databases and monetize that data. So I'm going to walk a little bit through some of the challenges and how we're doing what we do with data management. So, one of the problems that we feel is that the challenges that you as a radiologist have are clinically related. And yet when you look at the statistics out there today, radiologists are suffering burnout, images are getting larger, more complex, difficult to read. You've got not as many people going in. There's a prediction 35,000 radiologists short in the next few years. I mean, these are all challenges that having a clinical solution isn't necessarily going to solve. So we believe at Enlitic that a large part of that starts with the technical challenge. And so, technical challenge. So, data standardization starts at that foundation. And when I talk about data standardization, what I'm really talking about is take a medical imaging study, you've got multiple studies coming in, you name it CT head, CT neuro, CT brain. You want to find that 42-year-old female Hispanic patient that has a nodule. Well, what are you looking under? CT brain, CT neuro, which is it? Too many queries to make? So what we do is we look at the gross anatomy, we look at the pixel data, we look at the metadata, and we standardize the study and series descriptions in this particular case so that you can then see and find that data. And so that forms the foundation. So Index is great where you have multiple modalities, whether it's the same vendor or not, where you have multiple facilities sending that data in, because as you know, teleradiology, you're going to get data, different descriptions. Data governance strategy, so as a former tech, there was a lot of times where I would put whatever title in I want, which messes up your hanging protocols, messes up the data routing. I didn't know any better at the time. You look at how those data routing issues work. I don't know if you work with a specific work list, but some RADs only do MSK, and suddenly there's something else in there. They call the PACS admin, say, hey, you need to route this to the right person. That takes time, delays the reporting. Similarly, when a study doesn't show up, you spend time looking for it. So that's a data standardization problem. When you spend too much time searching for those studies, is always a problem. And then the hanging protocols and the dictation templates. If it doesn't match, you don't get the protocol. We've heard, how many times, I started out in this business setting up hanging protocols. I would create tons of hanging protocols just so that every option would work. And that doesn't work either. Because as soon as an upgrade happens or somebody acquires a new study and they change it, the tech does something, protocol doesn't break, and you spend 30 to 90 seconds dragging the images around where you want them. So that becomes a big challenge. And then you have poor data quality. How many times have you seen either null or scout localizer in the field, and that's showing up as your first study because again, your hanging protocol's not working and the protocols don't recognize that. So again, big issue with data quality. If you do any work with disease registries, you know how much time you spend cleansing that data so you can submit it to the registry. Again, becomes a big challenge. And then finally, you have tons of data sitting in your archives not being leveraged because again, over time, those descriptions have changed, new modalities, new studies, new series, all of that, and there's a huge way to take that and monetize that, but it begins with data standardization. So, in the workflow, all these clinics and hospitals are generating data, send that data through the Blackford platform, so now you've got one platform to work with, you don't have to worry about integrating multiple sources. The data goes into Index, and as I said, we look at the gross anatomy, we look at the metadata, the pixel data, and then we have an inference engine that sits on top of that, standardizes those study series and descriptions, moves it to the PACS, so now when you pull it up on your hanging protocols, it works 99% of the time. Can't say 100%, they won't let me. So then whether you have to send that off to an AI algorithm, so many times you have to pick the slices, you have to have the algorithms fail because the wrong study goes in there. How do you manage that? Well, this again, data standardization helps solve. So our Blackford partners and all of their AI vendors benefit from that data standardization because it makes the whole workflow so much simpler. So now that data goes through, whether it's AI or 3D, goes off, goes into the archive, and now that data is standardized. So now you've got the ability to have all of that routing, you have all that data, you can use it going forward in the future. We also make a second product, not on part of the platform yet with Blackford, but that's a data anonymization which then allows you to monetize your data. So again, using AI, we're looking at the gross anatomy, the pixel data, the metadata. You know, AGFA uses military ID, military rank, for their MPI field. Well, most of the anonymization tools out there give you a set standard that you have to go on. Well, there's identification right there that's not being covered. Using our tools, we find it wherever it is, regardless of how many fields are there. We don't limit it in that respect. So that's a little bit of how the workflow is. At the end of the day, the impact is huge. So when you look at capacity, by standardizing those descriptions, just from the simple perspective of simplifying the bandwidth, instead of sending an entire study for processing, you can send just the series. And at 8 cents a gigabit, was it valuable or not? When you do it all day long, it starts to add up very quick. That network capacity becomes a challenge. When you look at where the majority of errors occur, it's 36% of them are after the acquisition. So that's routing the data to the wrong workstation, to the wrong work list, routing it to the wrong, or not routing it to the right position or the right telerad reader. 36% of the time that fails. When you look at, from it, the matching descriptions, we've been able to show that radiologists can gain 10% of their time back from reporting. Now, whether you use that to finish the day early or do 10% more studies, there's a revenue upside on one side and there's a sanity upside on the other, right? So you can gain that reporting time back. Additionally, there was a paper done by NYU not that long ago where they had so many different series and studies descriptions that by standardizing them, they were able to reduce those down by 94%. That's huge. They went from something like, I think it was 2,500 descriptions down to 145, don't quote me on those exact numbers, but it was a massive description, which then has an impact on your clinicians who are trying to understand, what am I looking at? Because they don't really understand what an FSE exam is or a STIR, because they're not MR specialists. You make it clinically relevant, which is what we do when we look at that data. And then on this side, we do a little bit of billing and coding. So when an exam is coded, we're able again to look at that image, determine that there's contrast, match that against the code to flag that as a discrepancy, to say, hey, you gave contrast, you didn't code for it, you might want to change that before you submit the billing. That speeds up revenue recognition, and on average, about $280,000 per site that they lose in lost revenue from underbilling. So that's a massive, massive recoup there. Improving the data quality, I mean, Gartner says that it's a $12 million problem of having poor data quality. By standardizing the data, you can improve that data quality so that you can do analysis, you can do all of the processing you want to do and improve your workflows. Enriching that clinical data, again, when you look at a monetization strategy, how do you take years and years of your archives and turn that into money? On average, a study is worth $125. When you've got thousands and thousands of studies, that's a significant new revenue stream, but you've got to have good data quality or that price drops dramatically. And so by standardizing the data with Enlitic, you can improve that and get more value out of that study. And then finally, that whole monetization strategy, when you combine the data standardization with the data anonymization, you've now got clean, PHI protected data that's standardized, so your researchers, whether you use it internally or externally, can look at that data, pull out reasonable results from it, and get the full cohort if they're looking for that 42-year-old female Hispanic patient with a nodule. It makes it much easier for them to do that, and that data then becomes much more valuable to not only your organization, but to others as well, and a new revenue stream. So at the end of the day, we're impacting your clinical workflows, your operational workflows, and even on the financial side, having a huge impact there, improving your capacity, improving your workflows, and making life much easier for all of us.